What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the TCG Empire YouTube channel. Today we are taking a look at Arceus V-STAR, and this is going to be being paired with Giratina V-STAR. Now, as we know, Arceus Giratina has been a dominant deck within the format, with the ability to power up a Giratina V-STAR to use that Lost Impact attack, hitting 280 damage, being able to modify it with some attachments for tools that can buff the damage, and overall, it's very nice. The only issue with this deck, though, is that we have no way to one-shot Charizard EX within the format right now. But answer has been solved. We are playing a 1-1 Superior V-STAR. So this deck is going to be known as Arctina Superior. Superior V-STAR, a really cool card. Using that Regal Blender, you do 190 damage, and then you can move any amount of energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way you like. With a double turbo attached and one grass, you're hitting 170. Charizard is weak to grass, so you're hitting for a total of 340 damage, and you can move the energy. So that means that if you're in a situation where the Superior is going to get knocked out on your opponent's next turn, providing they have 2 Charizard out, and you have 3 prizes left, that's going to be exactly 270 damage, which means that if you know that that's coming, you have the ability to move a double turbo to one of your Pokemon and the grass energy to one of your Pokemon, and you can rearrange energy in really any way, shape, or form that you please. Overall, this card is fantastic, and it pairs very well with Arctina, considering that Giratina for the Lost Impact attack uses that grass energy. So in here, we're going to be playing a 4-3 Arceus line. We're going to be playing Bibarel because Bibarel is standard. We are playing the Skwovet just so that way we can use Skwovet into Bibarel and multiple turns. And if you set up 2 Bibarel, it works perfectly. Just a 1-1 Superior because, again, it is really only for the Charizard matchup. Otherwise, you're just doing things you would normally do. We're playing 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, 1 Switch, 1 Escape Rope, and all of everything that's fun in between. We are playing that Path to the Peak because we have no abilities after we use our Arceus V-STAR. And then we have the ability to play 4 Boss's Orders as well as 4 Iono in order to disrupt our opponent heavily. So as always, the deck list will be right here just so you guys have a full, clean view of the deck list. And keep in mind too, the description will have the deck list so you guys can copy and paste it. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. Thank you so much for, viewing it, stopping by the channel. If you do enjoy it, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and consider subscribing, as I just mentioned, because I upload every day, and I feel like the content is good. Content has been improving. But with that being said, it's up to you guys. Again, I want to thank you for all of the love and support on all of the videos. The Pokemon videos have been doing fantastic, and you guys have been killing it. So, as always, thank you for stopping by the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the gameplay. Later. Alrighty, guys. So here we are into game number 1 with that Arceus Superior and Giratina deck. Gonna see exactly what we can do. My opponent does win the coin flip, so they're gonna decide whether they want to go first or second. Considering that we are playing the Path to the Peak and things like that, it's going to be kind of important that if my opponent is playing Charizard that we kind of try and set everything up. So we're going to be able to see right here off of this mulligan, and we can go from there. So it seems as though my opponent is indeed playing Charizard, which means that we need to try and set up the Superior and go from there. So my opponent does mulligan it one more time, so we do get to see a couple extra cards, and we can go from there. We don't have the ability to one-shot a Charizard except for using something like that Superior, so we are going to have to be cautious of, what we can do, but Path to the Peak will actually help quite a bit, and from there we can kind of try and set up. So I think the game plan here is just to Nest Ball for the Arceus, and then attach the double turbo, and from there figure out the rest. So our Superior is in here, and we do have that Superior V, which does 190, and I believe we get to move an energy. So looking in here, we do have 3 Path to the Peak, and we do have a good amount of energy, so I'm not too worried. So we will be able to put the arc down, and then we can attach the double turbo. we can play that Judge. The Cleansing Gloves isn't going to be as useful. I could have attached it just so that way I had it, but again, it's nothing that's too prevalent or irrelevant. So next turn, we actually do have access to being able to KO a Charmander, getting that Arceus V-STAR out, powering up something like the Giratina, and going from there. The cats are going a bit crazy, so if you hear some bells ringing, it's due to their collars. So my opponent getting out his own Arceus. Thankfully, we do have access to that path to the peak, so we are going to be able to shut my opponent down and go from there. My opponent gets rid of an Iono as well as a Charmander. There is the Mew attaching that fire energy, and my opponent is playing full bling today. So the Giratina is going to be able to one-shot the Arceus. We should have Superior in order to one-shot the Arceus. So Superior for Charizard, Giratina for Arceus, and everything in between. So my opponent is going to be able to hit that 180 if they find a way to retreat. If not, we're in a decent position. We can actually continue to power up our board. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of... I could get rid of the DTE. The Psychic Energy I'm okay with getting rid of, and we'll get rid of the Giratina. And then we'll grab that Arceus V-STAR. And then looking at this, we'll probably grab a Switch and also grab a Supporter. The damage off of Arceus is going to be somewhat irrelevant, so I'm not too worried about that. And we can actually use the Nestash as well in order to potentially see some more cards. So we'll use that Starbirth, and with Starbirth, as I mentioned before, we can grab the Path to the Peak just so my opponent doesn't have access to his own. And then we can grab the Switch. But what I kind of am wanting to search for at the moment is a Draw Supporter. And then we can also grab something along the lines of the Switch. So that way we can attack, set up the Superior, go from there. And even with a DTE, we still do one-shot the Charizard with Superior. So we'll grab that Switch, just double-checking everything else that might be prized. So we can go Switch into the Arceus, use that Professor's Research. We do actually get access to Path to the Peak as well as Ultra Ball. So that means that we can go Ultra Ball. And we're not going to get KO'd, so we can grab the Raihan as well as the Boss's Orders. And we can grab the Superior and then start building up our board. So we can put the Path to the Peak in play, hit that 160 damage, and then we can actually grab the energy, and I'm gonna put 2 on the Superior. Let's see if I hit the DTE. I'm still in a good spot, and I have Boss anyways for the Arceus. So considering I got rid of 1 Psychic, I think Superior is going to be the most important thing in this matchup, taking down the Charizard. So we'll use the Superior here. We do get another Iono. Not going to be as beneficial off of the Iono once we start taking more prizes, but again, it's nothing that's too unimportant. And thankfully with Superior too, when we do take the knockout, we can actually go and power up a Giratina off of it, if I remember correctly of the attack. So we actually do get the DTE as well, which is perfect. So my opponent gets a lot of what they need, but thankfully with the Superior, we are going to be able to take a knockout. And we do have access to that Artisan as well. My opponent, again, not going to be able to take a knockout with his own Arceus, which means that we're in a good spot. And due to the Charizard actually being Dark type, it means that the Superior V-STAR isn't weak to the Charizard, which means we're not going to get one shot. So we're actually in a very solid position. Now my opponent might come up and swing with the Arceus, but I don't think that's going to be too important. And so my opponent just goes for that Burning Darkness for 210 damage. And then now what we're going to get to do is showcase the power of the Superior V. So I'm going to save the Ultra Ball. We'll get rid of one of the double turbos. And then what we can do is grab the Superior. Now looking at Superior, we know that we want it. So the Superior, you may move any amount of energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way you like. So this is quite perfect. So we can actually attach to the Superior the double turbo. And then what it means is we have the ability to retreat. And we can actually set up the knockout on the Charizard. And then we can actually move that energy to the Giratina. And we are going to be at 3 prizes, which means that my opponent is going to be able to hit 270 with the Charizard. But we do have the potential knockout on the Arceus, and then we can go from there. So we're going to take 2 prizes here. We do have access to that Ultra Ball as well as getting some more energy. So we actually have a good turn planned out. So not too bad at all. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to boss up the Pidgey. And with that, it means that I can take the knockout with Arceus and then take the knockout with Giratina on their own Arceus, which means that I'm in a super solid position. So the Superior, allowing the one-shot, putting in a lot of work. My opponent grabs Manaphy. I'm not too sure why my opponent went for the Manaphy, but I think due to the nature of being behind in prizes, we're actually in a good spot. My opponent is not going to really be able to benefit off of a whole lot. So we do get Ionode, but again, nothing that's too bad, and we do actually draw the Giratina V-STAR. So assuming that we have the ability to get an energy, we can actually set up a good turn here. So we will promote that Arceus, and we will draw for turn. We do get Escape Rope, which unfortunately isn't what we need, but we can use Artisan in order to just thin the deck. And we do have access to Bibarel as well as some Ultra Balls, so we're going to have to try and see exactly what we can do. My best bet here is probably going to be Escape Rope and just kind of forcing my opponent to bring up something. So my opponent brings up Manaphy. I'm going to bring up the Giratina. It does have that 2 retreat, but it's nothing that's too terrible. So we can go into the Iono. And off of the Iono, we actually do draw quite a good amount of cards. So we can actually use the Nest Ball. So that way we can check the deck, get an idea of how many energy we have left. And we actually do have a good amount of energy left, which means that we can kind of secure what we need to do here. So we can attach the energy to this Arceus. We can use the Bibarel in order to draw 5. And we do actually draw quite a bit of energy. Unfortunately, I think drawing those energy hurt us more than it helped us, but that's something that we can find out. So we use that Trinity Nova for 180 damage. And unfortunately, we're in a very awkward position now because my opponent's going to take a knockout with Charizard. So, unfortunately, drawing into all of those energy really hurt us. Because my opponent maxes out at, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12. My opponent's hitting 300 damage right now, so we definitely have to just hope that my opponent can brick. We can promote something like the Bidoof and hope my opponent doesn't have access to Boss. Now, if my opponent does get the Pidgeot out, then we're in a very tough spot. So there's the Colress Experiment. So my opponent is thinning. Going to get rid of all of the Battle VIP passes. There is the Rare Candy. Going into the Pidgeot. Using that Quick Search ability. Grabbing the one card. Using Super Rod. There's the Burning Darkness for 300 damage. So the only thing that we're going to be able to do is try to buy ourselves a turn by promoting the Bidoof. And we do get Path to the Peak, which is fantastic. We actually needed that, which means that we can attach the energy here. We can play down the Path to the Peak. Evolve into the Arceus V-STAR. And then we can actually use Judge to thin my opponent's hand, hopefully not giving him boss's orders. And then the following turn, try and draw into what we need. So here, we'll just thin the deck as much as possible, just so that way in the following turns, we have the ability to draw as many cards as we need. We do actually get the boss's orders, which is fantastic, which means next turn we can KO the Arceus and go from there. So I just have to hope I didn't give my opponent boss or a counter stadium, because if I did, then my opponent has a way to get out of the path lock. But my opponent does have to find quite a bit. So there's the Burning Darkness for 300, and now we are able to secure ourselves the win. We're able to promote the Giratina, attach the V-Guard energy, use that boss's orders to bring up the Arceus, and then we can use Lost Impact, 310 damage, taking our last two prizes with Lost Zoning 2 of those energies. So not too bad. Definitely was a little bit awkward in the end, but again, it's nothing that was too terrible to deal with. So that was game one, guys. Let's see if we can get into a game number 2. Alrighty, guys, into game number 2. Gonna see exactly what we can do when it comes to this matchup. Not too sure exactly what my opponent is playing, but we're gonna be able to figure it out. Looking at this hand, not too terrible, but definitely not what we want to see. It's gonna be a little bit awkward. We do have access to that nest ball and potentially the turn 2 setting up an Arceus. And we do have Bidoof, so actually it's not as bad. It really just comes down to if we can hit that Arceus V-STAR in order to kind of continue our turns. And we are playing against the pesky Mew matchup. So, let's see. What's the best way to approach this? The best way to approach this is probably setting up Arc in order to one-shot Genesect and just use Boss as well as Path. I think that's probably the best way to go for it. So we'll see exactly what we can do. So we'll get that Arc out, we'll bench the Bidoof, attach a Grass Energy, and then the following turn we have access to Judge, potentially getting Path. If we can hit a DTE or Path, as well as the Arc, then it gives us the ability to kind of set up the rest of our turns. It is going to be pretty awkward though, depending on what my opponent can do. So we'll see exactly how this can go. If my opponent is going to have to V-Star for a Battle VIP pass, we should be okay. But my opponent plays Iono, getting a fresh new 6 cards. And looking at our 6 cards, that's actually fantastic, as we can actually play the switch, use the double turbo, get the Ultra Ball, and we can actually get the Arceus and actually boss and Path to the Peak the Mew, which means that my opponent will be kind of set back, and then we can set up a Giratina or another Arceus in order to take those knockouts on something like the Mew. But the Mew V-MAX we can actually KO with the Cleansing Glove. So this this draw was actually perfect. So what we'll do is we'll use the switch, attach the double turbo, use that Ultra Ball, getting rid of the Superior as well as the Giratina, just because the Giratina isn't going to be as useful. I'm sorry, the Superior isn't going to be as useful. So we are going to have to be wary of a couple things. And we do have access to that judge for the next turn. So we can use this Star Birth. And we are hitting for 180 damage. So this means that we can get the Path to the Peak out. I could grab the barrel as well as boss, which doesn't seem too bad. But I feel like having access to judge next turn, but barrel is kind of irrelevant. So I think what we're going to do is we'll grab the boss's orders, and then we'll also grab the Path to the Peak, so that way we can try and shut my opponent down. My opponent didn't use the V-Star, but they are going to have an out, but it means that they have to waste their V-Star on something in order to benefit from it the most. So we'll use that boss's orders on the Mew, taking 2 prizes, and then we are going to be able to power up a Giratina and go from there. So we'll put energy here, just so that way we have the access to one-shotting next turn, providing we get energy as well as an evolution. And we do actually get 2 prize cards here, so not looking too bad if I do say so myself. Now, if my opponent does have boss as well as some power modifiers, will be a bit awkward. But again, we can just go after another Mew potentially and try and take the knockout from there. So there's the Lost Vacuum, getting rid of the Iono. So my opponent is going to be kind of searching for that boss. My opponent has to get at least a DTE as well as a power modifier and a boss. And there is the power tablet. Fusion Strike System 4-1. My opponent gets Hisuian Heavy Ball. If I run into a situation where my opponent does KO the Giratina, then we can go after a Mew. So my opponent plays Iono. So that's actually really good for us, as it means that we have the ability to take the knockout next turn. Unfortunately, we don't draw into the V-MAX or the Giratina V-Star, so that is something we're going to have to keep in mind. We do have access to that Squovit, though, which means that we can try and set up some future turns. Now, if my opponent does take a knockout on this Arceus V-Star, we're going to be in a pretty awkward spot in the sense that we're going to need something like Raihan in order to power up the Arc. So my opponent plays down Path to the Peak. And now they're playing Featherball, grabbing that Mew V-MAX. We can take 3 prizes here. We should be pretty good, though. Again, it really just comes down to how my opponent decides to set their board up. If we do have access to that Raihan as well, we can actually try and set up some good turns. So my opponent is going to be able to take the knockout on this Arceus V-Star. Now it really comes down to the Squovit and making sure that we have the ability to KO and go from there. So we do have access to Squovit. We have access to the Arceus V-Star. Now, considering my opponent used 2 power modifiers, assuming that one is prized, we should be good. Now, we do have access to V-Guard. Having access to that V-Guard is fantastic. So what we're going to have to do is evolve, use the Squovit, and hope that we can hit something big. And we do hit the Raihan, and Raihan is actually something that we incredibly needed, because now what this gives us access to is using the Raihan, we can attach to the Arceus V-Star, and what we're going to do here, we could grab the barrel, or we can guarantee ourselves the knockout, and with V-Guard, there's no way my opponent can actually take a knockout next turn on the Giratina, which means that we're set up for the following turns. So, and we're going to take 3 prizes, so I think what we're going to do here, safely grab the Giratina V-Star, evolve, we're going to be able to hit that 310 damage, taking the knockout, and we can keep ourselves in line. So what we're going to do is get rid of the grass energy, as well as get rid of the psychic energy here, take our 3 prize cards, and we just put ourselves back into a great position. My opponent wants the Mews to be out of range, means he has to evolve both of them, and assuming my opponent only plays a 3-2 line, or a 4-3 line, there is 2 Mew V-Maxes available, but it's going to be something that's tricky. With the V-Guard as well, my opponent has no way to one-shot. If my opponent has 2 power tablets as well as a choice belt, they're only hitting 280, and they only have 1 power tablet available, so we are going to be able to set up for the next turn, take our knockouts, and go from there. Now, we do have to find the energy. Thankfully, we do have access to Judge, but we do need to find that grass energy in order to take the knockout and go from there. If we can't, we'll be in a bit of an awkward spot, but again, it's nothing that's too terrible. My opponent probably going to Iono us to 1, which would be a bit unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. If that happens, again, we do have the Squovit luck on our side, so if we can get the first flip out of the way, we should be good for the second. And there's my opponent putting down another Genesect. And looking at our DTE count, we still have 3 DTEs left. So if we get a DTE, we are in a solid spot. So we just need the boss. So there's the Cross Fusion Strike. My opponent going to hit damage, and we're going to see exactly what we can do. There's the 160, and now it really just comes down to if we can draw the energy. So we do have access to Research. We can use that Nest Ball in order to thin the deck, get rid of some cards. Use that Professor's Research, hopefully hitting the grass energy. Unfortunately, we don't. But, as we know, we do have access to a lot more when it comes to what we're trying to do. We can get rid of the... we'll get rid of the Iono. And from there, we can grab the Barrel. Bench the Bidoof. Use the Barrel. Use the Squovit's ability to Nest Dash, get 1 card. And we do hit an Arc. Unfortunately, a unplayable card at the moment, but we do have Industrious Incisors. And unfortunately, we don't hit the energy that we need. But it's not the whole end of the world. We still have access to potentially setting up the rest of what we need to do. I should have put the energy onto the Giratina, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. We just have to hope that we can draw into boss next turn. So, and we're going to have a lot of chances to thin. So, what we can do is we'll just have to pass that path to the peak in play. We do have the ability to attach the energy as well, play down the Nest Ball or fail it, use the Arc, draw 5. So, it all comes down to if we're going to be able to get a supporter or not. So, my opponent goes for the retreat. There's the switch cart. Going to take the knockout on this Giratina. And then it comes down to if we can find our boss's orders. If we can find our boss's orders, we're in a very good spot. If we can't, unfortunately, we lose, but it's not the end of the world. We have been able to showcase quite a bit of good luck when it comes to everything. And we do have access to 2 Bidoofs, actually. So, speaking of the boss's orders, we actually top deck it, which means that we have access to using boss's orders, grabbing that Mew, and then we can hit the Trinity Nova, 230 damage, getting the 2 grass energy, accelerating to the Arceus, and going from there. So providing that we had access to 2 Bibarrels and things like that, we would have been able to hit the energy. So, and there's the double turbo. Again, not too bad if I do say so myself. So that being said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. If you found this deck fun, share it with a friend. With that being said, again, thank you guys for all the love and support on all of the videos, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's video. Later.